Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight, we'll be covering the Analects, Book 3. Would anybody like to read their version of Book 3 verses? We'll start with verses 1 and 2, and then we'll move on from there.
I have the Leg A
Okay,
translation.
go right ahead.
Number 1, Confucius said of the head of the Ji family, who had 8 rows of pantomimes in his area, quote, if you can bear to do this, if he can bear to do this, what may he not bear to do? Unquote. Number 2, the 3 families used the Yang Ode while the vessels were being removed. At the conclusion of the sacrifice, the master said, quote, assisting are the princes. The Son of Heaven looks profound and grave. What application can these words have in the hall of the 3 families? Thank you.
Thank you, James. I'm sorry. Would anybody else like to read their version of the Analects? Will, I see you're about to unmute there. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just joined. How far are we going?
Just Book 3, 1 and 2.
1 and 2. All right. Okay. 3:1. Confucius said of the Ji family, they had 8 rows of dancers dance in their courtyard. If they could bear to do this, what can they not bear to do? 3:2. The 3 families used the Yang Ode while removing ritual vessels. Confucius said, assisting our royal princes, the Son of Heaven stands majestic. How could this song be used in the halls of the 3 families?
Thank you, Will. Jason, would you like to go ahead and share your translation?
Okay. Just 1 minute. Okay, I hope you can see this. Okay. Okay. Confucius speaking, bemoaning about the family of Ji, said, if one can tolerate them performing the 8x8 dance in their family court, then is nothing intolerable. Okay. So I think here has a lot of historical background here. Okay, so first we talk about Ji family. Okay, because Confucius is in the state of Du, and the Duke of Du basically is powerless. He has a 3 family. I think the next chapter we will talk about 3 family. So Ji family, Shu family, and the Meng family. These 3 family. And the most powerful family is Ji family. So remember, that's the Confucius' home state, state of Du, and the Duke of Du, basics, the power has been shared by 3 powerful family. Okay, so that's the first thing we need to know. Second thing is the so-called the 8-row dance. So basics, that's according to the region. So 8-row dance, I think it should be 8x8. So there's a 64 people dance. I don't know what's the purpose. It could be celebrate or worship to the heaven. And this kind of 8x8 is performed by the emperor, which is only one in China. That means the son of heaven, or the emperor of Zhou. For the Duke of Du, which is a feudal lord, they should only perform 6x6. That means 36 people. so they don't go beyond. And for the Ji family, which is assistant or minister of the Duke, they shall only perform 4 by 4, which is only 16 people. That's the ritual, okay, or the rule, or so-called Li, has been governed for all the royal family. But since the Ji family are so powerful, and you can imagine, like, you know, they are rich, okay, so they have the soul power, so they got like perform the emperor's dance, so they use 8 by 8 dance. So when Confucius see this, if he is furious, that's why he said, if one can tolerate them, which means Ji family, performing the 8 by 8 dance in the family court, it's supposed to be the emperor's royal court, but they perform this dance in the family court, then it's nothing intolerable. So I think that's like serious violation, okay, of the ritual. So in this book, book 3, basics, most of them are deal with the ritual. And you will notice that Confucius is very concerned, he's not concerned about you are not doing enough. He's concerned about you are doing too much. Okay. So that's why he's complaining, bemoaning about the situation, the family, only just a family. Okay, how can you perform the dance which is supposed to be performed by the emperor? So that's the first thing he complained. And the second one, you can see the basic, the same thing, right? The 3 noble families play the music of Yong, okay? Okay, the Yong music is, again, it's only played by the emperor, which is specific designated to the emperor, okay? And when do they play? When they do after the sacrifice, right? After finish, you have to clean the dishes. When you offer to heaven. And when the time you finish your offering and finish all the sacrifice, then you have to clean the dish. They start to play the music. And the music is called Yong, okay? And then Confucius noticed the 3 family, the Ji family, Su family, and the Meng family, these 3 family in the state of Du, when they finish the worshiping, they clean the dishes, they play the music of Yong, which should be supposed to be only played by the emperor, the heaven of sun, right? So Confucius started to quote the Book of Ode. Book of Ode is comparable with music because each ode, each point, it should be able to sing with music. So he played this music of Yong, which is matched with the ode, okay, and the song of ode, okay, which the lyric said, okay, the lyrics of Yong music said, the Lord of fiefdom, the Lord of fiefdom, which means the feudal lord, like a state of Du, right? The Lord of fiefdoms come to assist the Son of Heaven, stands magnificently, okay? So that's the song so-called, in Chinese called 相为辟公天子穆穆. That means the feudal lord is assistant, the lyric said the feudal lord is assistant the son of emperor, and they stand magnificently. Okay, so that's the lyric. So Confucius used this lyric to complain. This music is supposed to be played by the emperor when the feudal lord is assisting the emperor. How can you play this one, right? He said, how could these words be used in the temple of these 3 families? So if you read these 2 with the background, you know Confucius is very concerned about during his time, not the feudal lord, the family, the minister of the feudal laws is already violated the rituals. So I think that these 2, in the Analect. So
Thank you, Jason. So the theme that I'm getting here is the importance of ritual. Aman, would you like to?
There is that, and actually, I'm glad you touched on it because there is the importance of ritual, but it's more than merely the importance of ritual. It is what it says about the character of a person who will violate ritual or go to stations above their own or assume authorities that they do not have. And this goes back to Confucius' very deep concern with people's character, their internal character leaking out in their public conduct or in their everyday conduct. He saw, violation of ritual as a symptom of a lack of ren, and a lack of that being a lack of shao in that person's, natal development. So the G family gets to be sort of his whipping boy to illustrate here's exactly why this counts. Because when it is done wrong, when, a family is raised wrong generation after generation and believe themselves to be, as worthy, as capable, as deserving to perform rites that are not their own, rituals that are not their own, then what you've got is a recipe for disaster. That's why the ritual violation is so important to him. It's not me. I don't think, and I honestly believe that Confucius wouldn't care if the ritual was done or not. But if you're going to do it correctly and do it for what's appropriate to your station. Do it if it's required to be done. But if it's, if it's just for show, it's kind of what he had said before about making sacrifices to spirits that are inconsequential to you, then it's just a facade and it's an absolutely worthless act.
Wonderfully put. I mean, I do think that that says something about the character of an individual, the willingness to kind of exploit tradition for your own benefit. And this, it's a lack of sincerity that actually exists when you're willing to do that, and that is dangerous. If you think about it in any kind of situation, even in today's world, people that are willing to sacrifice the rituals or go through the rituals and maybe kind of bend them for their own gain, their own political gain. And you can talk about this and maybe in a religious context in the West, it becomes incredibly dangerous. So it does say something about the character of the individual. So anybody have any comments? Go ahead and type exclamation point.
yeah, and let
Please.
me make a little bit different view on the
Sure.
personal character. Okay. I would think it's Confucius' anger, okay, about this violation of ritual probably more than just the personal character. I think that's because during that time, the social mobility, the social change, right? Because before, if you use the dance as an example, the emperor, they can afford 64 people, and the duke can only afford 36, and the family only afford 16. It's simple, right? But when the time change, the people in the lower ranking become rich, probably richer than their boss. So they can afford a higher standard. So they start to show off doing this one. So of course, it's a personal character. That's true. But more important, probably Confucius see like it's not just one person doing this. Probably everybody do this, and then everybody think that's fine, you know. So I think that's Confucius. Why Confucius is so angry on this situation, because that's the social phenomenon instead of just one person doing this. That's my view on that. And then if you see the second one, the three family, I think it's probably during that time, everybody doing this. That's my guess, you know.
Interesting. Thank you. James.
It makes me uncomfortable because instead of sort of a profound learning, this is like focused on the dangerous aspects of the society at that time. In other words, obviously, people had to comport themselves carefully, I believe, at that time in Chinese history. I forget which kind of era of wars it was, but the idea of the first one reflects a kind of like a statement about the audacity, right? The audacity of the owner employing too many dancers. So yeah, absolutely audacious, an audacious move, possibly a dangerous one. But the negative is kind of like I see Confucius not in the guise of a wise man, but kind of like the guy that's just leaning against the tree, picking his teeth, saying, you can see what's going to happen to him, right? You know, this is not, you know, he's doing the wrong thing this time. And then the second one, so that bothers me, that aspect of it. The second one is the Yang Ode. And it sounds to me like the Son of Heaven is there, right? So in other words, this is a family, three families dinner in the presence of the sovereign. And if that is the case, and I might misunderstand it, so you can correct me. But if that is the case, then because it says so my translation says the Duke of. Actually, that's my Google translator, right? The Duke of Jiangwei, Mumu, the Son of Heaven, did she take it from the hall of the three families? So the relevance here is, was there approval? In other words, is this something that the sovereign would approve because assisting, yeah, so that the one translation says assisting the princes. And so it's kind of like more difficult to understand exactly what the setting is, but I wonder if it means something like, is this being appropriately done in the right context with the right people present? Because, and like what you said was very instructive, Jason, you said the song was wrong for the setting. So I guess that sort of helps. The song was appropriate to the ruler, not to the nobles.
Yeah, no, James, let me kind of, I think the situation is this. Let me make it a bit more clear on the situation. Music and the poem, okay, so-called the Book of Ode, I think they probably match each other. So there's one poem and you can sing with some music, which we don't know what kind of music because we totally lost. So the music of Yong and the lyric, okay, which is in the poem, they match. So I believe this music supposed to play during some ceremony. The situation is the emperor, which is only one in China, which is the son of emperor. And they probably have the duke, okay, visit the emperor, okay, and they do some ceremony. So of course, the host, the main character is the son of heaven, which is emperor, and the duke will assist. Then they play this music. That's supposed to be the grand scene, very important ceremony. But probably this music is beautiful or become popular, right. So in the family, which is not in the court of the emperor, in the family court, they start to play, okay? And they do it, probably play lightly. That's why Confucius got angry on this situation. Something like play, let's say we play a national anthem, okay? When you sweep the floor, right? And Confucius said like, no. When you sing the national anthem, you should be stand up and then salute. You should not like, when you clean the floor and then you sing the national anthem. I think it's similar, it's probably similar to this kind of situation.
Thank you for those comments, James. So next
Yeah,
up, we
thank you,
have Will.
Jason.
Did you call me?
Yes, I did.
Oh, thanks.
Sure.
I couldn't find it, but I believe there's some point in Confucius' life where he's so disappointed in what he sees that he actually says, I can't serve this person anymore. I'm gonna leave. And I don't know if it's this scene with the 8 rows of dancers or if it's another scene. Do you know, Jason?
I don't. It's not this one. And then my understanding, Confucius not just leave the job. He probably got fired. So I think that's another one. I think in this section, this book, they have many scenes about this situation. Confucius is angry about when the family goes to worship the mountain Tai, and then there's many situations Confucius got angry. So actually, when I do the translation on this book 3, it takes me a lot of time because a lot of background is very difficult to explain.
Thank you, Will. So next up, we have Kevin. Kevin, are you there? If not, we'll go to Ahmad.
Now you hear me, I guess.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, now we can hear
Oh,
you.
sorry, I put a long microphone. Okay. I look at the 2 sides for the one from individual rights or personal conduct, another side from emperor. So I know this is back to 2,000 years ago. However, what can I learn or think about from today? Now, one individual could be richer than the country. So can these individuals do their own party bigger than the emperor and use all whatever the music, whatever the emperor can own? I can do it. So it's no issue in modern days, right? Most likely. Another side from emperor side, okay, you own. Basically, in traditional Chinese, they got own language for the empire, own language, own culture, own music. The empire used, you cannot use. Even sometimes, even the name. For example, you call it Joseph, you are the king, so nobody else can, use this name kind. That is tradition. Now later on, maybe not that day, but that's going that slowly the people getting change, can even more emphasize. They call it 礼乐治国. Basically that's Confucius ego about use music and 礼 and manage the country. It's good, sounds good, but in reality, I would say we need both sides need a question about this. Thank you. By the way, I would hear both, everybody else think about this.
Yeah, no, I think you raise a really interesting point in the beginning where you started to say, how does this relate to today? So it's not only trying to understand it from today's perspective or from the historical perspective, but how does the underlying lesson, how can we apply that to today's world? Anyway, Mon.
Thank you. And Kevin, I'm going to piggyback right on that because of what I was thinking as Jason was talking about sort of the social economic implications of this. It made me think a little bit broader about the calamity that happens when people assume authority or assume their positions to be more than they are, and have the means to do so. And of all places in the world, it made me think of Mar-a-Lago. Bear with me a moment. The post heiress who created Mar-a-Lago was explicit in saying what she envisioned was a winter White House, and that she wanted it to be a place that she could coax presidents to come and stay at in their winter months down in sunny Florida. It never became that and was, for all regards, woefully unsuccessful. But in 2016, one of Trump's infamous tweets was writing my inaugural speech at my winter White House. And this is couching this place as having some sort of imbued authority that it does not, that we the people have not given to it. The heiress who created it, the billionaire who owns it, their social might and capital is giving them the hubris to put it on a par with something that is a house of the state. And this is kind of what Jason's comments made me think about, and what Kevin was saying, what can we learn from this today? It's not only gauche that somebody would assume heirs that they don't have proper title to. It can spiral into a condition where those presumptive ideas become a norm that people adopt, and the next thing you know, it actually does create a strife and a conflict. It's not unthinkable to imagine a country where we have two White Houses right north and south of the Mason-Dixon line under current events. Not that I'm, forecasting, but this is sort of the spiral of events that I think Jason was touching on, that Confucius could foresee, where you have those of means simply taking on authority and rights and privileges that they are not legitimately entitled to.
That's an excellent example. I mean, it kind of undermines the institutions that actually govern the people. Therefore, it can have an effect by not respecting, not holding to social norms that where you have a certain respect for the institutions that govern you, and that has an effect on the population as a whole and how they view the government in particular instances. So that was an excellent example of how that's still relevant today. So thank you, Aman. So next up we have Suki.
Hi, thank you. I'm more interested into the question in the 3.1. If this can be tolerated, what cannot be tolerated?
Mm-hmm.
I think Confucius is even he's angry with the performance, with the dancer, with the sound. He still think this is can be tolerant, but he's more concerned about if you can break rules of the dance and the music, you can break other political orders. The way you do one thing is the way you do everything, and actually, Confucius was right, because the family were created about 100 years before Confucius was born, and 11 years before Confucius was born, the Ji family actually used the state army for the private use of their family and their other families for their private use. And also by the time Confucius returned home from his journey, and the Ji family were collecting more land taxes than the ruler of the Lu. So I think the question is the political disorder, the political betrayal cannot be tolerated. It's not only the dancers or the song, just one aspect of their not respect the rule and create political danger for the whole kingdom. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Suki. And that is an interesting question, is that political betrayal that cannot be tolerated. Is that something that exists in China today?
I mean, today?
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying in a way.
Yes, yes,
I-
absolutely.
I will say yes, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's essentially what we're
I would say
saying.
that's the tradition, though. That's the very tradition, you know, even.
爸爸吃饭。
I think there we go.
Yeah, it could be. I think that Suki make a very good point here. Basics, Confucius is very reserved, right? He say you should not violate the ritual, but actually what he meant is when you violate the ritual, it looks like I just hire more people, more dancers, but the background is you get more power and you disrespect your boss. Okay, so all this kind of situation, and that's become a subtlety, you know, between the relationship between the sovereignty and the minister. So that's a good point. Yeah,
I like that example too. If you get more money than your boss, then all of a sudden you're not respecting him anymore. Like the institution or your person that's actually enabled you to do something, that you're automatically now just kind of not respecting the process that that enabled you. Anyway,
I would just like to add that yes, this is relevant in China today. It is still a very hierarchy conscious culture. It is differently unacceptable in modern China than it was even, say, 40 or 50 years ago during Maoist China's time, where it was anathema and could lead to terrible consequences to be seen out of step with the authority. Authority is still respected, but there is some greater degree of room for dissent and pushback than there was at that time.
Thank you, Aman. So we have Kevin, and then I want to move on to the next section.
Yeah, for me, my point is about what is, for example, we order chaos and rules, principle, we need to rethink. Is that self is correct, right? If, for example, that's for music 8x8, that's absolutely correct. So that's just one example, right? So here's we know the caste system in tradition. If this in China could be land like that. However, we believe or not, in some in Communist Party, they don't. They call the woman is a half of the sky. So that's basically equalized. That's dramatically change the it used to be the man or that's confused as father and son and the husband and wife order, then half. That's something like something is positive. However, anything if you overdone, that's damage going to happen. It's something need a little bit of balance and achieve some harmony between, find a little bit better. Sometimes it go too far left, sometimes it go too far right. It's just now we talk about the individual personal character, personal rights. Another side is from the emperor. Either way, you could be, damage for the whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. So why don't we, if I don't see anybody else with any other comments, actually, in the interest of time, we can actually, this is a good time to move on. Would anybody like to read the next 4 chapters? So chapter 3, 4, and 5, and 6. James, thank you for
Okay,
being author.
3, 4, 5, and 6.
That's correct.
Okay. The master said, if a man be without the virtues proper to humanity, what has he to do with the rights of propriety? If a man be without the virtues proper to humanity, what has he to do with music? Number 4. Lin Fang asked, what was the first thing to be attended to in ceremonies? The master said, quote, a great question indeed. In festive ceremonies, it is better to be sparing than extravagant. In the ceremonies of mourning, it is better that there be deep sorrow than a minute attention to observances. Number 5. The master said, the rude tribes of the east and north have their princes, and are not like the states of the great land which are without them. Number 6. The chief of the Ji family was about to sacrifice to the Tai mountain. The master said to Ran Yu, can you not save him from this? He answered, I cannot. Confucius said, alas, you will say that the Tai mountain is not so discerning as Lin Fang.
Thank you so much for that, James. So next up, Will, would you?
Yeah.
Okay, please. Good.
All right. 3:3. The master said, if a man is not humane, what can he do with ritual propriety? If a man is not humane, what can he do to music? 3:4. Lin Fang asked about the prime principle of ritual propriety. The master replied, a great question indeed. As regards ritual propriety, it is better to be frugal than lavish. As regards mourning, it is better to be in deep sorrow than at rest. 3:5. The master said, having rulers in a barbaric state is not as good as losing rulers for all the Xia. 3:6. The head of the Ji family performed the Lu sacrifice at Mount Tai. The master said to Ranyo, could you not save him from this? Ranyo replied, no, I could not. The master said, alas, did he say that Mount Tai is inferior to Lin Fang? Thanks.
Thank you. I really, I like that translation. It'll be interesting to see how close it is to Jason's.
Okay, so let's see how close.
I think you miss Suki.
Oh, Miss Suki, what happened?
Oh, Suki, forgive me. Forgive
No,
me.
no worries, no worries. Yeah. Okay.
Suki.
3.3, the master said, being human and yet lacking humanness, what can such a man do with the rights? Being human and yet lacking humanness, what can such a man do with music? 3.4, Lin Fang asked about the working principle of the rights. The master said, an admirable question indeed. With regard to the rights as a whole, it is better to err on the side of being frugal than on that of being extravagant. With regard to the mourning rites, it is better to err on the side of showing too much emotion than on that of fussing over every detail. 3.5, the master said, the E and the D tribes with their rulers are not like the Chinese states, which have none. 3.6, the head of the Jisoo family was getting prepared to make a sacrifice to Mount Tai. The master said to Ranchu, can you stop him from going ahead with it? Ranchu said, I cannot. The master said, alas, who would have thought that the spirit of Mount Tai would know less about the rites than Ling Fang? Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I'll have a question about that translation maybe a little bit later.
Yeah,
So-
I'm really impressed by the translation. You know, can you tell us who is the translator?
Yeah, please, actually.
Let me go back to
Because I can say that
Anping.
human, like a human.
Yeah, Anping Qing. I think she's from Taiwan, and
What's his name?
Anping Qing.
Anping Qing.
Can you
Yeah,
put it in the
sure.
put it in the chat?
Sure.
Yeah, that's
sure.
interesting because
Yeah.
a few things, but I just a little bit disagree on 3.6. I will explain. So,
I'd be
Okay.
interested to hear 3.4 what you thought of that as
okay,
well.
yeah,
Okay.
3.4 I like it, but 3.6 I would like Will's translation. So
Okay.
okay, so let's see. You know, it's no other people. Then let's see. I just have to say that book 3 I find out it's
no.
difficult. Yeah, it's a little bit difficult. Okay, so I wish I'm going to change it to what Suki put it here. So, but okay, the master said, if a man is not run, okay, what can he do with the richer? If a man is not run, what can he do with music? So the beauty of Suki's translation is the words, the man and the ren, okay, basics, the pronunciation are the same. Both pronounce as ren. So it's read as ren or bu ren. So if you translate as being a human without a humanness, that's a pretty good, you know, sounds pretty similar to Chinese sound. And the ren you can translate as a humanist. So being a human without humanness, okay. So what can he do with richer? Being a human without humanness, what can he do with music? Okay, so I think this kind of translation sounds very good, and it's difficult to make. So, but anyway, I think the point here is richer and the music. Confucius said here, basics of people, a human will perform richer and perform music, but you should have ren or humanness or benevolence as in your heart, right? So that's the foundation. So famous saying is the Zhou Gong, which is the Duke of Zhou, who is probably 200 years, a few hundred years before Confucius. He created the system of ritual and the music. And the Confucius think that's the perfect system we should follow. So that's this what he's talking about. 3.4, Lin Fang. Okay, Lin Fang is a famous scholar during the Confucius time. The scholar about the ritual, about Li, same as Confucius. I think later on we will read. Confucius is very proud of his broad knowledge about Li. Okay, same as Lin Fang. But Lin Fang will ask Confucius, what's the root of Li? Okay, so what's the prime principle of you translate this way of Li? And of course, that's a difficult question. So Confucius say, what a big question. Okay, so I do big question because 大哉问 basics, that direct translation, that's big question. So Li will be better done economically than extravagantly. Okay, funeral will be better guided by one's grief than simply to attend to the ritual stipulations. So here, the important thing is the and the funeral. The ritual, again, all Confucius, the major concern is you are doing too much, okay, more than you, so you spend too much money to do the ritual, okay, and he will prefer you to be more economically or be more frugal. About the funeral, again, during that time, some aristocrats, some family get rich. So when they perform funeral, they spend too much money without showing your heart. So he will consider E here. It doesn't mean simple, it means just follow the stipulations, the guidelines, and without heart. So that's Confucius' concern in this one. Number 5, Confucius said, the master said, even the barbarian countries have their kings. They are unlike the states in our land, which haven't. So I think all the translation are doing the same thing, but the difficult thing is here called Yidi. Okay, and I think when James read his translation, he talk about East barbarian and the North barbarian, which is correct. Chinese has called Yi, as if you see these words, this word means East barbarian, which is related to the arrow and the bow. Di, okay, this word is Northern, so we related to animal. Okay, because if you know Chinese, the word related to animal because they are horseback. And the Rong, which is on the west, which if you look at the Chinese word, is related to the weapon, the stagger. Okay, and the Man means barbarian in the south, which if you look at the word, is related to buck because in the south the weather is humid, so a lot of buck. So Yidi Rongman, that's the barbarian in the 4 different directions. But in general, people call Yidi as a barbarian, just like Greek will call barbarian, which is non-Greek. Okay, so here Confucius is kind of like satire. Okay, so because he said the barbarian country, they respect their kings, they have their head of the chief, right? But unlike our land, we don't respect our son of emperor because during that time, the emperor, the son of the heaven, become weak. The feudal lord got powerful. Even the feudal lord is not that powerful because they are family. They have a powerful family underneath them. So that's Confucius' complaint about the situation. So the word he used, instead of calling our land or China or whatever, he called 诸夏. Okay, so some translation will call it the Xia. Okay, so remember the first 3 dynasties is Xia, Yin, and the Zhou. Confucius is during the Yin dynasty. So he called 诸夏 means our Xia, that means our land, our culture. So basically it's different dynasty, but Confucius also recognized as the same culture. So he said he is kind of like complaining the culture has been changed. We are even not like the barbarian. We even don't respect our emperor. 3.6, which I think, because the Chinese, especially in the ancient, there's no tense. So we don't know the Ji family is going to visit Mountain Tai or already visited Mountain Tai. We don't know just by the word. So, but this one I assume the Ji family already visited Mountain Tai. Okay, so why Mountain Tai? Because Mountain Tai is on the east province. Shandong is the highest point. So usually for tradition for last 2,000 years, the emperor will go to the peak of Mountain Tai to offer sacrifice to heaven. So this kind of ritual is very important. Even the emperor don't do it every year. Only in the very important event, they will do this. So that's an important event. But Confucius see the Ji family went to Taishan, the mountain Tai, to offer sacrifice. So again, they are doing as a family underneath the Duke, already done something supposed to be done by the emperor. So I think the situation is already happened. They confused to Ranyo. Ranyo is the family minister, or you call the family staff of the Ji family. So when you see Ranyo, usually will associate with Ji family. So Confucius told Ranyo, say, after the master asked Ranyo, say, couldn't you have stopped them from going? Okay, he asked you, why didn't you stop them? Okay, and Ranyo replied, I couldn't. The master said, alas, does this mean the mountain Tai is inferior to Lin Fang? So here's some language problem. If I translate directly by Chinese, that means, alas, does this mean Mount Tai is inferior to Lin Fang? So it doesn't make sense, right? How can you compare a mountain to a scholar? That's a very strange. So one translation would be, does that mean the worshipper of Mount Tai, which is Ji family, is inferior to Lin Fang, who is a scholar? That's one way to translate. Another way to translate is to talk about Mount Tai means the spirit of the Mount Tai. So this, because you offer sacrifice to Mount Tai, and the spirit of Mount Tai should receive it. So if the spirit of Mount Tai receives the sacrifice, then does that mean the spirit is inferior to Lin Fang? Okay, so that's the two way to translate, because it's difficult to understand if you want to compare a mountain to a person, right? So you have to compare a worshiper of the mountain to a person, or you compare the spirit of the mountain to a person. So that's my point on 3.6. Thank you.
Very, very interesting comments. I definitely want to come back to 3.5 and 6, but Ahmad, do you have any comments that you wish to share?
Not a lot to add. I just want to remind that this is coming off of the previous couple of chapters regarding the Ji family and their absolute failure, character failures. And then we're talking about the importance of Li and what one has to do Li correctly is to be a man, quote unquote, of Ren. And without that, it's impossible to do Li correctly. The simple example I thought of there that we probably all experienced is a ritual as simple as shaking hands. If you've ever shaken hands with a person who had no interest in you, you've had the experience of somebody who was not human-hearted enacting a facile reenactment of a ritual. It's a really kind of unpleasant, unnerving experience for just about anybody. You have to have that human-heartedness, that humaneness when you enact even the simplest of ritual. And then talking about the roots of ritual. Where do they come from? And he's right, Li Fang is the preeminent scholar on this, with roots that go way back. And here, once again, it's, be frugal, be economical, don't overdo. And in your ritual, it's better that you err on missing a detail here and there if it's a funeral for the sake of authentic grief. Again, we see this call for authenticity of character. 3.5 is one that I find, I agree with what Jason was saying about this being a slight on the kingdom of China at this time, not having a real king of their own. But I think it's double barbed. I think that not only is he saying that the respect towards our emperor is non-existent in our land. I think there's also a not so veiled accusation that these people who are behaving and trying to, in all but name perhaps, be kings, aren't kings either. They aren't as noble and as decent as these barbarians who actually know who is in their appropriate place within their society. And then lastly, 3.6, the Mount Tai sacrifice. The only thing I would add there is that Mount Tai is one of the 5 sacred mountains in China still to this day, still has pilgrimages that are done to it. It's important to Confucians, to Buddhists, to Taoists. All 5 of the sacred mountains are, and in fact, you can go to them and see temples of all 3 of the Chinese religions littered across the mountain pathways. They've fallen. You can almost tell who's most in favor in any given time in a dynasty of China, and even in modern times, by which one of those temples is being kept up the best, which one is getting the little bit of extra of state funding to help spruce it up. All of them were in great disrepair during the Cultural Revolution. But since about the early aughts, I'd say, you start to see all the temples getting a little bit better, a little bit more attention, a little greater upkeep. And today, if you were to go, you'd see that the Confucian temples are violating 3 point, where was it? 3 points about extravagance. Sorry, I had to actually look it back up.
It's okay.
Yeah, the refrain that it's better to do it economically, not extravagantly, to
yes,
do it authentically. Yeah, 3.4. Sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
They are definitely somewhat extravagant now, and that reflects the new administration of China's real push and real embrace of a version of Confucianism that serves their own purpose. That's not me saying that with any sort of, it's not a veiled secret of any kind. They are very openly embracing Confucianism, and they are very full-throated about which version of that it is that they will embrace. So yeah, these 4 chapters begin reiterating the lessons that we've just been sort of dumped into with the Ji family. You read book 3 and start hearing about the Ji, and you're like, why is he so down on these people? Then you begin reading these other lessons in here, and it's like, oh, now that makes sense, because they are exactly what he is working so hard to curtail or stem or squash out within his society, because they are the rot that is starting from the head and working its way down.
Fantastic comments as always. We'll come back to a lot of those points, but I see James has actually typed exclamation point in the chat.
Next time it'll be a question mark. Watch out. The number 3, I like the fact that he does both virtues for humanity, but in other words, I guess etiquette, but that he does the same contrast with music. And I think Jason mentioned that this was new. Maybe somebody mentioned that it was music was fairly new in the culture, just brought in by the king. And as a ex-musician, I could say that somebody who is studying music and or just developing their taste in music, they can tell the difference in performances. They can understand, like if it's a classical piece or a cover, they can sort of understand the benevolence. They can hear the benevolence in the person who's performing. The person who performs music transmits their benevolence to the listener when they perform. A lot of people don't realize that. Sting. This is why Sting was so popular. You know, a really great singer, really great musician, you know, transmits their benevolence as they perform. A lot of the great pianists were like that too. Vladimir Howitz was a good example. I don't know the best current that's like that, but it's kind of like it's basically you can feel it up in the vibrations, so to speak. The benevolence comes across. And I like the part where he talks about the customs, like if it's the rites of the festive rites and the mourning rites. So you know how to behave in the festive rites and mourning rites. He says that it's better to be somber and to be in deep sorrow than to take care of all the details, but. And of course, that's very cultural because here in the United States, we don't have that at all. People are somber at funerals, but that compared to a lot of the world, we're not somber at all. We just sort of like stand still. But if you look at films of funerals in other countries, people are weeping, throwing themselves on the coffin and all that stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, that is actually interesting. I thought that was and I thought about that when Suki read hers. I thought she said something along the lines of too much emotion. It's better to be too emotional than not emotional. But anyway, then fastidious is something that I have written down. But I know that wasn't what she said. But I thought that was interesting as well. But I want to come back to 3.5 after Will or after Kevin.
Should I go?
Please, absolutely.
Thanks. So, and thank you, Amant, for relating this example of sort of modern norms. That just is so illuminating in how to think of the idea of not following norms, and it's got me just thinking about how incredibly relevant all this stuff is to our current time and place. The idea of it's just making this this ritual thing very relatable. So but 3.6, I just find why did he bring up Lin Fang? And I'm trying to wrap my head around this. And is it kind of like saying, do you think the principles of chemistry don't know how to act more than a chemistry textbook or something? Like is Lin Fang like the example of like a textbook on rights compared to the actual thing itself, which is Mount Tai? I think it was very confusing to me, the mention of Lin Fang. Thank you.
Can
Sorry.
I
Please.
take a crack at that? I do think you are onto something there, and it grammatically is a little awkward. I'll grant you, but yes, ostensibly what he is saying is the G family is doing something improprietous, and I don't even know that that's a word, but I'm going to use it for now because it fits the situation. And Rangyo is charged with the teachings of Confucius, which is, amongst other things, do the right thing, speak truth to power, even when it may cost you personally. Why haven't you stopped them? Why couldn't you stop them from doing it? Ranyo is often in the master's crosshairs because he took this job with with this particular family, and they were getting wealthier under his watch. And that kind of told Confucius, at least through results, that Ranyo wasn't imparting the lessons he should impart in his capacity as their minister. And when Ranyo says, hey, there's nothing I could do about it, he's basically saying, well, who would have thought this, pinnacle of ritual sacrifice, Mount Tai, wasn't going to give you, was going to give you worse advice, just by example, than here, my star student, your other cohort, Lin Fong, who has told you the same thing I am, which is this is about as bad a thing as they could be doing. So it is that sort of anthropomorphizing of a actual sacred space, but it makes sense when you think of it in context of these actors and what their positions were relative both to Confucius and to this family.
Let me interrupt here. Sorry.
Sure.
I think that you make a very good point. That's none of at least the book, including Chinese traditional Chinese interpretation. Beyond, I think that that's Confucius is not blaming on Ji family. He is blaming on Ranyo. Because Ranyo didn't do his job. He's the family staff. He give advice to Ji family, right? You think about the situation. Ji family already went to do something, violate the ritual. Okay, he did it, I don't know, 2 months ago, last week. And Confucius called Ranyo, say, hey, why you didn't stop them? You should have stopped them from going there. Ranyo said, no, I can't. So Confucius is not complain the Ji family, complain the Ranyo. Say, you think Taishan is less important than Lin Fang, who is the so-called textbook. So Ranyo doesn't follow the textbook. Use Will as an example. Ranyo doesn't follow the textbook. He followed what the Taishan supposed to do. So that's why Confucius compare Taishan, the Mount Tai, with the scholar, because Ranyo supposed to listen to the scholar, not listen to what Mount Tai had to do, right? So I think that start to make sense because Confucius is not complain the Ji family, he complained to Ranyo, you didn't do the job because you didn't listen, didn't follow what the Lin Fang is doing. He do what the Mount Tai is supposed to do. So I think that's the probably make more sense than other interpretation.
And I also think there's an element of, you got this job, I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get this job when you're so bad at it if you're allowing them to do this? Obviously, they're hiring you because you're going to help them make their profits, not because you're going to guide them the way I taught you to guide them. And so there's a little sour persimmons in it as well.
Excellent points. James, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's the second time you misnamed me. Pretty interesting.
I apologize. I really,
That's okay.
please forgive me.
Anyway,
Jason is
I just-
like actually after you, so that's what I was looking down at. So I'm sorry.
oh, okay, you're right. Okay, I hope he doesn't get me. What I noticed in Confucius is a strong sense of irony. I mean, this guy's got a really strong sense of irony, so when he says, do you think that the mountain is not as discerning as Lin Feng? It's basically Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like par for the course. He's going to he's going to anthropomorphize the mountain in order to make his point that you're not following the guidelines. Yeah, the way I think Ammon and Jason both explained it. But just my point is that he's just very ironic and willing to say things like that cause the person to say, "Wait a second, what did you say? Oh, okay, yeah, right." Take 2 or 3 seconds to kind of like have it click in.
Thank you. Do Jason and Aman, would either of you like to comment about that? If not, we'll go to Suki. Okay.
Yeah, I still think Confucius is complaining about the Ji family because Ranju he cannot really control his boss. He can suggest, but eventually the boss. Actually, we didn't know whether he asked his boss to stop or not. But I think even he said no, don't do that. His boss would not buy this idea, and also I think it's so it's if the purpose of sacrificing to Mount Tai, right, is to please the spirit of the mountain, so the Ji family must assume. So I think that's a Confucius complaint. The Ji house has a very low knowledge, so the Ji family assume the spirit of the mountain knows less about the ritual than Ling Fang. Otherwise, the spirit will be offended rather than pleased by the sacrifice offered. So it's like if the mountain willingly accept the sacrifice, which is not appropriate, meaning the mountain knows less about the ritual, but it was assumed by Ji house. So I think ultimately he's Confucius is belating Ji house didn't know anything about the ritual. That's my guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Suki. Aman.
I want to both agree and push back with Suki because yes, I do agree. I think Confucius has no love for the Ji. They represent a lot of what is bad to him. But I do think his ire is also with his student, and it's one of the few places where he can speak it out. Because as you were saying, if Ranyo were to go to them and say, "Hey, you can't do this," well, they did it anyway. Did you insist enough? Did you insist enough that they fired you? Were you beheaded for your insistence on holding the line on what is right? You have failed on the penultimate lesson that I teach, which is you must retain upright character at any cost. And so the Ji family's failings are their own, and he dislikes them. But his student going into their service either A, means his student failed to vet this family, failed to consider what he was walking into, the sort of hornet's nest he was going into, and the amount of work he'd have to do to, in Confucius' mind, correct it. Or B, he just became one of them and was only too happy to give them the advice that makes them the most profit, because that is his priority and still not doing what's right. So I think both these things can be true at the same time. Despite this, it's funny that Ranyo still winds up in some ways being an exemplary example of the sort of scholar that Confucius wanted to turn out. But it took him longer than this episode in their time together. Much longer, in fact, before he was, quote unquote, respectable as a Jinsher, as opposed to somebody who was acting more like a, small man or Shaoren.
Thank you, Aman. So I see it's 10:20, and in order
So I
to,
guess you missed me.
oh, go ahead, Kevin.
Okay. Yeah, for 3.3, I was using internal, external way. One is if you intention is wrong, basically if you internal is not good, so doesn't matter you practice ritual or music. So that's very important. That's doesn't matter what kind of rules we use, right? And for 3.4, it's yeah, about this. That's I agree with this part. You know, one not a person called Ling Fa is not even Confucius students, but it's good they know what's the root about the Li, right? It's and he said it's you know, economic is better than, you know, luxury, so that's very important. And by the way, funeral is a very important part in Chinese culture. It's normally people spend, you know, the whole wealth even for the parents passed away, or and the second one also it's for it also talk about eternity. It's if you think that spend money, why don't you just in your heart? If you empathy, show your empathy, that's would be better. Yeah. Okay, pause here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So in the interest of time, I mean, I think we could actually try and get 3, 7, 8, and 9 in. And I mean, I do have a comment about number 5, but I can always come back to that. So would anybody like to read, James, if you're there, would you mind reading 3.7, 8, or 9? If you've stepped away, that's fine. Or Will, would you like to go ahead and read?
Yeah, I can go ahead. All right. 3.7. The master said, noble people never contend for a victory except in archery. They bow and yield the way to each other as they ascend to the hall. When losing, they drink. Even in competition, they are decent. 3.8. Zixia asked, pretty are her charming smiles, limpid are her beautiful eyes. Make the ground white to add colors. What does this mean? The master replied, painting comes after the white ground. Zixia said, so the rituals come after? ? The master said, it is Shang who can elate me. I can begin to discuss poetry with him now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, is that what number was that up to?
That was 3.8.
Yeah.
3.9.
Okay. Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Perfect.
3.9. The master said, I can talk about the rituals of the Xia, but they cannot sufficiently be corroborated by the affairs of Qi. I can talk about the rituals of the Yin, but it cannot sufficiently be corroborated by the affairs of Song. This is because they do not have sufficient literature and worthies. Were they sufficient, I could verify them. Thanks.
Thank you, Will. Does anybody else wish to read their
can read.
version? Oh,
I can read.
please. Yeah, go ahead, Sue.
Okay.
Thank you.
7. The master said, gentlemen have no reason to content. But of course, there's the archery contest. Yet on such occasions, they bow and yell to each other as they ascend the steps to the hall. Afterward, they descend the steps and drink together. Even when they compete, They are gentlemanly. 8. 子夏 asked, what is the meaning of these lines? Her entrancing smile, dimpling, her beautiful eyes so animated and clear. White renders the colors vibrant and distinct. The master said, white is applied after the color are put in. Does the practice of the rites in a like manner come afterward? The master said, it's you who have drawn my attention to such a reading. Only with you do I feel I can discuss all these. 9. The master said, I'm able to speak about the rights of the Sha, but the state of Qi is not able to provide the evidence to illuminate what I say. I'm able to speak about the rights of the Shang, but the state of Song is not able to provide evidence to illuminate what I say. This is because both the record and the worthy man of erudition are insufficient in these two states. If they were more plentiful, I could support my words with evidence. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Suki. James, do you?
Yeah, I can do mine
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
if we have time. Yeah,
Yeah, we
okay.
do.
What was it, 7, 8, and 9, right?
That's correct.
7, the master said, the student of virtue has no contentions. If it be said he cannot avoid them, shall this be in archery? But he bows complacently to his competitors. Thus he ascends the hall, descends, and exacts his forfeit of drinking. In his contention, he is still the Zhenji. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Number 8, Zhizha asks, saying, what is the meaning of the passage? The pretty dimples of her artful smile, the well-defined black and white of her eye, the plain ground for the colors. The master said, the business of laying on the colors follows the preparation of the plain ground. Quote, ceremonies then are a subsequent thing, unquote. The master said, it is Shang who can bring out my meaning. Now I can begin to talk about the odes with him. Number 9, the master said, I could describe the ceremonies of the Shah dynasty, but she cannot sufficiently attest my words. I could describe the ceremonies of the Yin dynasty, but Song cannot sufficiently attest my words. They cannot do so because of the insufficiency of their records and wise men. If those were sufficient, I could adduce them in support of my words. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Very much appreciated. So Jason, go ahead.
Okay, let me share my screen. 3.7. The master said, 君子 don't compete with each other unless in archery. They ascend to the hall, bowing and yielding, and then descend to toast and drink. This is the 君子 competition, or just like Suki's translation, compete gentlemanly. So that's the Confucius sportsmanship, right? So basic talk about not the gentleman, 君子 don't compete, only in the archery. And the important thing is they have 6 during that time, so-called 6 liberal art, basically the training for the aristocrats. So which is the ritual, music, archery, charity, writing, and arithmetics. Just like Greek also have liberal art, and the same as during that time, in the Confucius time, they also have liberal art for aristocrats. So So archery is one of that, and I believe Confucius is probably good on that. So so they do the. I think the Will's translation is interesting. Talk about the one who lose and drink. So he translated this. The author translate this word. 下 means going down, but the translator translate as the one who lose the archery. But I think most likely should be compared with this word. 升 means ascend, and 下 means descend. So that means they ascend to the hall to compete on the archery. And when they finish, they descend and they drink. So I think that's the situation. Just like today's game, like play golf, right? You play golf, finish, then doesn't matter you win or you lose, you drink or eat together. 3.8, 子夏. Remember 子夏 and 子贡 both are very good in the literature, which means they are good in the book of old. So here, 子夏, I think this one probably in just like a daily the casual conversation. So during that time, probably doesn't have a lot of book, a lot of novel to read. So they all very familiar with the 300 songs, 300 poems of the book of Odes. So 子夏 asked, okay, 子夏 asked in the book of Ode, he quote, look at the dimples in her fine smiles, the cleanness in her beautiful eyes. The plain clothes make her even more gorgeous. Why? Okay, so here, the first two sentences is from the book of Ode. Okay, so the book of Ode, this one is described a beautiful, the loveliness of Jiang, who is the wife of the Wei, the Duke of Wei, okay, he's beautiful. So the whole point described from her smile, her eye, her forehead, her teeth, her neck, her arm, her finger, just go through, just like in the Bible, the Song of Songs, right? They talk about like, let him kiss me with the kisses of this kind of thing. So and the last sentence, okay, the plain clothes make her even more gorgeous. This sentence is not in the book of Ode. So probably during that time, people add this one to the traditional book of Ode. So Zhi Xia is asking Confucius, okay, the book of Ode talk about this. Look at the dimples in her fine smile, the cleanness in her beautiful eyes. So then the point is much longer, but when Zhi Xia quote these two sentences, Confucius knows, okay, everybody knows what he's talking about. Then he said, some people, or at the time, people add the plain clothes make her even more gorgeous. Why? Why people add this sentence? And the Confucius said, okay, the master said, it's like decoration are added after the plain clothes. So the plain clothes, and you put a decoration on top of that, then you make it beautiful. That's Confucius' answer. So Zhi Xia is very smart. So during that time, they are talking about the poem and talk about beauty, talk about painting. And Zhi Xia said, yeah, it's not like Li, which is richer, is added later after the civilization. So that's Zhi Xia's learning from this point, right? The richer are added later. When he said later, he means after the civilization, after we have a civilized, we add richer. And the master said, son, who is the Zhi Xia's name, you enlightened me, or you bring up my point, right? I can start to discuss the book of Ode with you. So I think that's their daily conversation, not daily, one of their casual conversation. It's very interesting. Zhi Xia is asking about the poem and ask Confucius something like why people said the plain clothes even make her even more gorgeous. And Confucius say, oh, just like painting added on decoration added on top of plain clothes. And the Zixia immediately think about that's related to ritual. He say, oh, just like a ritual we added after our civilization. Okay. And the Confucius was surprised, say, yeah, you are great. So from now on, I can discuss the book of Odes with you. So I think that's the, I personally, I really like this chapter because it captured the relationship between Confucius and his disciple. 3.9. I think this one is very, I will call it the Confucius is show off, okay, to break it. He brought his knowledge about the rituals, right? He talked about Xia, Yin, and Zhou. Zhou is today, okay? So he talked about Xia and Yin, which Xia is, I think about at least 1,000 years before Confucius, and Yin probably 500, 600 years before Confucius. And the Confucius believed he know not only today's ritual, he even know the old times ritual. Okay, so and then here's a few names. Xia, okay, after being replaced by Yin, okay, their descendant still have a small state, which is Qi. That's why he said, the master said, I can describe the ritual of Xia dynasty, but the descendants in the state of Qi cannot verify my word. He talked about their descendant, Qi, even forget what their ancestors ritual. Okay, so they cannot verify my word. And he continued, I can describe the ritual of Yin, but its descendant in the state of Song cannot verify my words. Song is the descendant of Yin dynasty. Even their descendant forget about the ancient rituals, so they cannot verify my words. It is because there are not enough documents surviving. Otherwise, they can verify my word. So basically, Confucius is talking about I don't know how, but basically he know a lot of rituals in the Xia dynasty, in the Yin dynasty. Nobody can verify. The people, their descendant, don't perform the right ritual, and so they cannot verify. And they don't have enough document to prove, okay, what he knows. So that's Confucius said. I think it's implied he know a lot of the ritual in the ancient time. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Aman, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I'm gonna give my 2 cents and then I'm gonna get moving.
Okay.
Just a couple of quick things about each of these chapters. His appreciation for archery as the one contest that gentlemen can engage in.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the comparison to golf was excellent because it has become sort of the sport of the elite in our time. But it was a competition that one engaged in not just against others, but also against prior performance of your own. I believe he brings it up again later in the Analects where he talks about it's as bad to go shoot through your target as it is to shoot too short of your target. And so there is this idea of it needs to be hit just right. And that is obviously a metaphor for execution in anything in his mind. The Book of Odes and now we can discuss poetry. I am with Jason. I really like this because this is one of those moments where if you've ever had a teacher or professor or someone you admire who you said something to, who suddenly turned to you like you just said something brilliant and then suddenly wanted to engage more deeply. You've known that sort of warm, fuzzy feeling of the approval of this person. And that's what you see in this little vignette between Jisha and Confucius. Is 3.9. Yes, talking about the rituals of the Shah dynasty and of the Yin or Shang dynasties and their descendants failing to retain the documents of their rituals. I think there's also an implication here that his state was thoughtful enough not just to keep their own records, but also to keep records of these other ancient dynasties. And if they could do it, how abysmal that their own descendants failed to do the same thing. And that is, once again, that failure of Shao extended over generations. Yeah, and these start to tie back in, going back to the G family just once more of, here are examples of things going well, things going right, or broad examples of how entire generations have failed their prior dynasties. And all of it can be summed up in just these little actions here and now. The wrong number of dancers, the wrong music played. We see the makings of the decadence of this generation happening all over again. I do think there's, some sorrow to some of this with Confucius, because he really did believe he had the panacea. He had the key to making these things right. And if only he could get the right people to listen. But in lieu of the right people, quote unquote, listening, he'd get good people to listen. And hopefully those good people could be enough of an influence, far enough and wide enough, that maybe the right people would start to get the message as well. Didn't happen in his lifetime, obviously, didn't happen for many generations, but it did take root. As I've said before, it's amazing how difficult it is to steer away from Confucius, even after so many centuries, and even after his homeland tried to tear him up root and branch from, anything superstitious or ancient in the fall of the dynastic rule and the time of modernity. They really tried to disavow Confucianism, but it is so powerful. The ideas are so profound that they resonate long after his influences or his direct influence has waned. And I think we get just a little sampling of that here in book 3. The last thing I wanted to say is, I will often continue to take things out of order because I've read this a few times and certain vignettes stand out more in my mind. But one of the, I was looking it up before, comes in book 12, so we've got a while yet. But his answer to, how do you set everything right? What is this magic solution that you have to all these woes? And it's in a forward 8-character snippet where he says, Jun Jun, Chen Chen, Fu Fu, Zhi Zhi. And that translates roughly as king, king, minister, minister, father, father, son, son. Each person needs to be in their role, doing their correct thing and hewing that role to the best of their ability. If you hold that theme in mind as you read through the failings of the Ji or the failings of the states of Song or others to not uphold their proper role, you start to see where there's a nice thread sort of holding all this together. Thank you all I may not be back in town next Tuesday. If not, mea culpa. I will get to you the following week if I'm not home by then. But have a great week, and I will talk to you all again soon.
Thank you for your insights, Amon. They're most welcomed, and as always, it's wonderful to have you with us. And hopefully you'll be here next week. If not, we will see you then on the 12th.
Sounds good. All right. Zaijian,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you so
Hi,
much,
Amon.
Amon. So, folks, go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat to share your thoughts on verses 7, 8, and 9. Oh, Will. Okay.
All right, thanks. Let's see, which one is it? 3:8 seems very similar to 3:3, where talking about 3:3 says, if a man is not humane, what can he do with ritual propriety? And it seems like ritual propriety is it's built on just a foundation of sort of these very basic good human virtues, and in the book I have, it says that he's Zhu Xi is a famous commentator on the Analects, and he says that regarding 3:8, he says ritual propriety should take wholeheartedness and trustworthiness as its real substance. And this is similar to the fact that one should first whiten the ground before laying colors on a painting, or as Jason's translation has it, plain clothes, giving, making her beautiful features more outstanding. But I also just wanted to note how similar this feels to studying Buddhist texts, which are generally, there's a root text, which is like verses, and then there's commentary. But even though these aren't verses, it's like they're short, very memorable sayings. And it's just a great way to learn something, is to have just like things that you can carry with you, and recollect at all times. And the chapters of the Analects are like that. And but then, like, if you're a scholar or a student studying this, you would go into depth the way we are here on each one. But then you and that's kind of the way Buddhist texts, I think, are studied. There's like there's usually some very short root text, and then much, and that has a bunch of pithy, memorable sayings in it. And that's it. Just I don't know if that's an Asian thing, or but it just seems like a great strategy for I'm surprised that European philosophy doesn't. I don't know if it's like that or not. The early Greek philosophy, but anyway, that's just my what's on my mind. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Will. There's a couple things actually that I want to follow up with, but one thing in particular, actually, is something that Amon said. The one thing that keeps coming up for me is the role that you play in society, and you have to do that well. And I was wondering if anybody had any comments about, maybe the understanding of that, as far as not only it's not only the role you have, but it's the ritual that goes along with that role in general. So, anything, James? You have a little.
Hey,
Eh,
hi. That's my new symbol.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, is that that down there? I'm sorry.
yeah, anyway, yeah, I think I like what Will was questioning about, the early, a lot of the early Greek scholars are classified as the Eleatics. There was Parmenides and Heraclitus were the two big stars at the beginning. But I think before them, there were the scientifics, the mathematical school, uh, they're really gifted in mathematics and music, and they weren't the Eleatics though. But mostly what those philosophers were interested in were various kinds of learning. They were interested in wisdom, knowledge and wisdom. I think what Heraclitus was kind of all over the map. He set a lot of the tone for the Greek philosophy that came after. And Parmenides wrote a poem that had to do with what is being. So, there's basically two ways to look at being. And the goddess, he went to speak to a goddess or a witch, right? He spoke to a witch, and she told him what were the ways to talk about being, to conceive being both in, well, we understand that there's beings everywhere, and it's kind of scary how many kinds of beings they are, and some are scary, but other ones help us and so forth. But then there's this mysterious, mystical kind of being that she created the mysticism for him, and so that's in the poem too. And that sort of set the tone for a lot of philosophy in Greece, that it was going to become a knowledge philosophy, but it was going to be, but there were going to be tones of mysticism in it. So, like concern about what it means to worship certain gods and things like that. So those were popular kind of like meanings in Greek society. And it's interesting that this took place only in one geographical area. Like we don't have we have ancient books from Persia, but a lot of them are religious,
Right.
and so forth. So there's ancient books from other places. There's also the ancient books at the same time. There are ancient books from India, the Vedas, which are and they were written down over time, so we don't know when the earliest ones were available. But they think they were very early. They think they went back earlier than the Greeks, and but they weren't written down until later. And they contain a lot of like amazing. If you've ever taken a course on the Hindu philosophy, that'll knock your socks off, because they were very deep. The world is one sort of like breathing
Right.
God that breathes over eons and eons. It just doesn't breathe quickly at all, but we are incorporated into its patterns of existence. So, yeah, so there's a lot of cultures that are very deep. It just happens to be that this Chinese guy, Confucius, was really into the philosophy of manners, which is a little strange to me, and I've heard, that he was quite conservative, but I don't think all his philosophy is overwhelmingly conservative. But here I see in this chapter, in chapter 3, he seems to be taking very conservative attitudes towards certain. Before he was critical of certain students, but now he's being critical of some important families, some wealthy families. So it's this now I'm seeing the conservatism coming out, almost like it's a different philosopher.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the takeaways that I've had thus far from chapter 3 as well, is that there's a importance of virtue in your as well as the ritual aspect of it, but there seems to be um, an overwhelming emphasis on respect for positions in society. I mean, and for basically, just um, a moral behavior. I mean, so that's essentially what I I'm not seeing a lot of moderation at this particular moment in time either, though. As far as and I know that will be coming up later in the chapter as well. Actually, Jason, do you have any closing thoughts? I'm a little bit, as I mentioned, I'm a little bit dizzy here. So
Yeah, probably we can. It's about the time. Yeah, so
yeah,
I think that's great. And then this chapter is all about the ritual. So I think we probably will go another 2 weeks on this one. So and
yeah, we actually made pretty good progress this
yeah.
evening.
And then book 4 were about the even the Analect is not organized book by book, but different thing. But at least you can see here that book 3 is 80% about ritual, and the book 4 probably about 60-70% about Ren, the benevolence. And
Okay.
so it kind of organized, but not that well organized. So the same thing we will show together. Yeah. So I go through this. I also learn a lot, from different people's different idea. So that's great. Yeah.
Okay. James, do you
It's
have
good to
us?
go through it with everyone, and I think it's probably worth our time, and it's good to have the contrast and to have someone who can actually comment on the history, and it's not like Greek philosophy very much at all. I Plato, the star philosopher in Greece was Plato, right? So he was interested in ideals. He was interested in how good is good, what is
Right.
beautiful, all that stuff. So this is a different kind of philosophy for sure. Thank you.
It's very much more. It's a lot more practical. It
I
seems
try
like.
to comment with James about this one. I find out, this one, we reading this Chinese ancient philosophy with Greek philosophy is very interesting to read together, because not only they are different or opposite, when you find their similarity, I'm not talking about the content, I mean the way to understand, because honestly, I don't see they teach us anything, either Greek or Confucius. But they're too old. But basically, their interest part is how do they react to their society. So I think that's the thing we can learn, right? We're probably not necessary to learn how to be richer, doing this, but we know how they react to the society, how Socrates react to his society. And this part, you start to see the similarity. I think that's the wonderful part I like.
The history. Yeah. Thank you.
So if there aren't any other comments, I'll just do a really quick upcoming events announcement. Tomorrow night we have basically what makes a great conversation as part of our Comprehensivist Wednesday series, and that's in conjunction with the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society, and that'll be at 9 o'clock tomorrow evening. That's June the 29th. Then June the 30th, we have The Evolving Self, which is a continuation of the book by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, if I'm saying the name correctly. And I believe, I don't know what chapter they're on, and then we'll be covering the Bhagavad Gita both Thursday and Friday. And this Saturday, Jason, what do we have upcoming?
We go to talk about the first time. That's the first time being asked for a long time. Eventually, I decide to do Romance of Three Kingdoms. That's a novel. Okay, so I'm going to go through this novel, the Romance of Three Kingdoms. If you heard about this, that's a wonderful novel. So
Okay.
a
And
lot of Confucius, Taoism, and art of war practice in this book.
oh,
It's
really?
yeah,
Very
that's a lot of kind of like a summarize. If you read through, you will see the summarize of the art of war, Taoism philosophy, Confucius philosophy. They play in the background. I'm not saying the novel is teaching you this. The novel is kind of play on this philosophy as the background. So that's the interest part, and that's the part I try to focus. Yeah.
wow. That sounds really interesting, and I'm going to plan on being there next
I'm not sure
Saturday.
how many people ever really read the book, but it's long. It's very long.
That's all right. I mean, I'm very much interested in that and the art of war and some of the a lot of the texts that we've covered, how they relate to the art of war. And that's at 7 o'clock
On your time.
yeah. Yes, that's right. East Coast time, 4 o'clock your time. So keep an eye out for that. And then on Saturday, I forgot to actually announce Yasuhiko will be back. And that'll be at, what time will that be? 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And it's the new spirituality for the future. And so it's always a special when Yasuhiko comes here. He comes here about once a month. So I'm really looking forward to that on Saturday as well. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We actually made some very good progress, made it up to 3.9, which I'm impressed with. But great comments as always. And as always, it's an honor to be here. And thank you, James, for your contributions this evening. I apologize actually for getting your name wrong, but
That's all right. I've changed my symbols, so that's one benefit of the mix-up.
Okay. So, but yes, I look forward, and thank you, Will, as well, and thank you, Suki, for your for reading this evening. And I appreciate everybody's comments as well, and I really appreciate everybody, like Suki, what you had to say as well. So, all right, everyone. Hope to see you next week, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Take
Good
care.
night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.